Get those stretchers moving. The ceasefire clock's ticking. Sergeant Nelth Radek's voice cut through the smoke, sharp as broken glass. His boots sank into the slush of blood and frost as he shoved a supply crate aside, revealing a collapsed civilian beneath it, breathing, barely. The trench smelled like wet stone and scorched nylon, the air thick with discharged energy residue and chemical coolant still venting from a ruptured evac transport. Ocean Line 14 wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was a waiting graveyard, and the dead weren't waiting alone. Radek motioned to Corporal Idran, who sprinted through the haze, hoisting a folded stretcher with one hand and dragging a portable bioscan field with the other. The young man's face twitched with silent focus, his eyes flicking toward the static-filled sky like something might drop from it. They said 3 hours, Idran muttered as he dropped beside Radek. No drones, no shelling, just extraction. Radek didn't answer, his attention locked onto the slight tremor underfoot, not seismic, but too methodical to be natural, rhythmic, steady, incoming. A soft beep from his comm patch confirmed it. Too late. Contact west flank, 50 meters, not hours. They had stepped into something curated. This wasn't just a breach. This was bait. The static of laser plasma displays lit up in the distance. Enemy units, Varnock pattern, bronze-cased carapace over asymmetrical exosuits, moved with unsettling coordination. They didn't fire. They didn't even speak. They watched. Radek stood over the civilian, arms slightly raised, not in surrender, but in statement. We're medevac. You got your ceasefire. Stand down, he said, voice unshaken. The lead Varnock tilted his helmet, round, sensor-lined, expressionless, and issued a single command in their rasping tongue. Before anyone could move, Radek felt a lance of heat punch through his left side. He staggered, caught by Idran's grip just before the world tilted into shadow. Someone screamed, not Radek, someone behind him. The rest was noise, boots scuffling, the pop of a shock baton, the clatter of medkits kicked aside, the sharp whine of a disruptor charging, and then, silence. When Radek blinked next, he was strapped to a vertical rig, arms splayed, legs secured. Pain anchored him like iron bolts. His breath came shallow, one lung likely ruptured. Blood stuck to his lips like tar. In front of him, a tripod-mounted lens, cold and unwavering. A voice in the distance, Varnock dialect. Then translation flickered across a field banner. Here lies your pride, crumbling. See him, Earth. They'd activated a public war feed, not encrypted, not for intelligence. This was for broadcast, for spectacle. From a control scaffold above, a technician with gleaming sockets in place of eyes tapped on his control pad. The lens zoomed in, first on Radek's face, then his wounds. They angled him to reveal the exit hole in his side, glistening with blood and plasma gel. The camera panned, tilted, refocused. Someone off-screen laughed. Then again, louder this time. Not just one, multiple. It looped, an overlay of jeers synced with the feed like an audience reaction cue. Radek didn't move, he didn't scream, he didn't give them the courtesy of expression. Back on Earth's orbital strategic command, the feed came through 13 different relays, intercepted unintentionally, bleeding through a frequency meant for logistics tracking. Varanistev, a mid-level analyst with caffeine on his breath and stress etched into his posture, paused mid-scroll when the transmission hijacked his screen. What he saw wasn't combat footage. It wasn't interrogation. It was theater, cruel, deliberate, and far too clean. He didn't call for a supervisor. He didn't say anything at all. He isolated the channel, copied the route logs, and slid the stream to a secondary screen, fingers moving with quiet efficiency. Somewhere beyond the layers of data flow, he felt a shift, a decision hardened beneath the numbers. He marked it, category Delta Red, for internal use only. Encrypted copy created, file tagged, Voshan Trench incident, civilian violation protocol breach. Back at the trench, Radek exhaled shallowly. He could feel the cold in his teeth now. His heartbeat was wrong, too slow, too strong. The technician approached, lifting a gauntlet and pressing a calibration node against Radek's temple. The lens adjusted again. This time, it framed Radek's eyes, half-lidded, defiant, unwavering. He didn't blink. The Varnock commander overseeing the feed, General Rakes Talvor, watched from a ship cloaked above the trench. Inside his command cabin, the walls glowed with lines of coded affirmations. He chuckled as his officer leaned in. The humans are watching, the officer said. Let them, Talvor replied. They love their martyrs. Let this one rot on camera. The feed looped again, angled now with added overlays. Human sergeant, defeated, failure of evac command, Earth lies. Commentary trickled in from their faction's war nets, amusement, mockery, even betting lines on how long the soldier would last. But Earth still didn't speak, and Radek, bleeding out under a field of electric light, kept his silence. In the control room on Earth's orbital ring, General Tharn Mox arrived without a word. He viewed the stream, once, then turned to Varanistev and said, "Record the relay trace, every node, no summary, raw data only." He didn't ask who the soldier was, he didn't ask how it got broadcast. He simply added, "You'll prepare the breach paperwork under Article 47 Subclause Omega." Varan paused. "Null frame?" Mox gave a single nod. "Not yet. First we listen." Below Voshan, line 14, the bodies of the wounded civilians remained untouched. The trench began to flood, water from a ruptured pipe rising slowly, mingling with the remnants of medical kits, crushed ration packs and scattered comm tags. Radek's image continued to beam across dozens of enemy systems. Not a hero, not a warning. A spectacle. And Earth, watching through eyes colder than stars, never answered. Not with outrage, not with threats, only with the quiet arrangement of lines in a file, each one narrowing toward a single word at the bottom. Pending. Where's the origin relay? Varanistev didn't wait for a response. His boots clicked once against the polished corridor floor before he stepped into the operations chamber. The lights above him dimmed to blue as the door sealed shut, confirming entry into classified airspace. Every head turned. No one spoke. On his portable terminal, Radek's frozen face stared through the display like a curse carved in glass. "Show me the transmission spine," Varan ordered, stepping toward the central tier of heads-up consoles. The technician to his left gestured with a gloved hand, directing the interface as a constellation of data fragments scattered across the room's vertical laser plasma walls. No symmetry, no familiar signature patterns, just fractured pulses floating in red. 8 pings within coalition-licensed networks, none originated there. "So it's masked routing," Varan muttered, eyes scanning the flickering coordinates. "Start cold frame sequencing, trace back by encryption entropy, not by source location." They ran this like a neural loop, not a broadcast. Another tech leaned forward. "Sir, we're at 31 anomalies and rising." This was intentional, layered bounce-back architecture. They weren't just trying to broadcast him, they wanted us to see it, but never find it. Varan tapped a command key. His display zoomed on a narrow sliver of interspace static, an anomaly only visible in reverse time mapping. A timestamp appeared, Ni042, 1103 from current system time. He cross-verified the code trail with satellite orbital logs. There it was, a brief shimmer in a comms lattice relay just outside the Narlaxis perimeter. Only for 6 seconds. "Mark this," he said. Codename Frame 0. The atmosphere in the room shifted, not from sound or motion, but from attention. Every analyst stilled. They'd seen enough operations pass through to recognize the shift. This wasn't about locating a hostile anymore. This was about ending a story before it wrote its second sentence. General Tharn Mox entered without preamble. His coat hung like a loaded sentence, his expression carved from decisions made in darker rooms. He studied the data clouds with a single glance, then locked eyes with Varan. "You've confirmed the relay?" "Partially. We caught the final skip echo. The original source is deeper, possibly embedded within a Varanok fleet-tier command bridge, possibly even a cloaked relay ship, but we can't isolate that without invoking Article 17. Mox didn't blink. "And the reason we should wait?" Varan paused, collecting the tangled emotions crowding his logic. His voice, when it came, was restrained. "There's no tactical gain, no resources recovered, no forward post rescued. This was cruelty. Measured, stylized and distributed for effect." Mox nodded once, the kind of nod that meant everything had just shifted timelines. "Then it's a breach," he said flatly. Section 12, Clause Gamma 4. the mocking of a restrained Earth combatant during recognized ceasefire protocol, visual dissemination, intentional audience engagement, unauthorized biological exposure. That falls under black tier conditions. The lights around them pulsed a soft amber, heads-up overlays recompiled automatically, now displaying null frame protocol, in review in flickering amber gold. Do we have an established list of relay nodes? Mox asked. Not the full net, Varen admitted, pulling up a cascade of transmission decay logs. But we've confirmed multiple mid-route pings across the Narlaxis theater. If we go live with null frame, we'd be executing erasure strikes across 17 possible command zones. Some of them may be dormant. Others, active. Strike all of them. Mox's voice didn't lift. He didn't consult a war council. He didn't need to. Initiate redline cascade. Build the deletion tree from frame 0 out. Any node that passed even an echo of that transmission, erased. Under what flag? None, Mox replied. This won't be retaliation. It will be correction. He stepped to the center dais and pressed his palm to the sealed console. A retinal scan confirmed him. The platform unfolded to reveal a hardened case marked with 5 unbroken seals. No gloss, no ceremony, just dry steel and coded silence. He slid a card from his coat pocket. The embedded chip crackled with cold data, legacy instructions encoded decades prior, activated only when Earth deemed that words had failed. As the final sequence unlocked, a slow rotating prompt appeared. Engage null frame. Below it, the subscript, confirmation will trigger irreversible memory erasure protocols across all systems tagged within the designated node web. This action is final. Varen watched the prompt flicker. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, though the vents held steady. The console lights dimmed to scarlet. Mox signed in, his thumbprint smeared with a single cut just drawn across the pad. Authorization confirmed. Command keys engaged. Null frame active. Outside the room, a sealed compartment hummed to life as dormant satellites stirred in low orbit above the theater. They didn't need flight patterns. They already knew where to aim. Time frame to lock, Mox asked, gaze still forward. 18 hours, Varen answered. Max range triangulation requires synced orbital drift. Every target will be geo-stamped and queued. 0 emissions. No early warnings. Mox turned, slowly. When we're done, they won't even know what we took. The console sealed again, the data feed encrypted. The only record left was a single blinking entry on Varen's internal log. Operation Silence Fall, pending execution. He closed the terminal, stepping back. He didn't speak again. He didn't need to. The words had already been written, not in voice or ink, but in silence, calculation, and the red lines now threading their way toward the end of 17 command zones. Back in the viewing room, Radek's frozen image was finally archived. Not deleted, not memorialized, just cataloged. Just a single file buried under 1,000 security layers, and a new entry on Earth's classified doctrine. No broadcast is forgotten. Scrub the grid. If it blinked, it spoke. Jekvarn's voice dropped like a needle into the stillness of the signal ops room. His eyes scanned the heads-up display hovering across the curved wall, lines of thread-thin signal arcs twisted like neural pathways over a sphere of layered planetary scans. The data moved slowly, deliberately, each segment rewriting itself in real time as his gloved fingers slid across the control pad. Next to him, Aaron Klask sat with a tight jaw, his chair barely creaking as he leaned forward. The decryptor's palms hovered over a fielded input slab, his fingertips manipulating waveform residue in echo fragments like a surgeon with nerves made of braided ice. His every gesture sliced deeper into the enemy's comm lattice. 3 of the 7 pings looped. "They're decoys," Aaron said, voice clipped, low. But one of them didn't follow fractal logic. It pivoted mid-trace, like it was shielding another node. "That's our baseline," Jek muttered. "Let's build the stack backward." Behind them, Voron Istev stood with arms crossed, eyes sharp. He wasn't directing. He wasn't commenting. He was watching the hunt unfold. "Overlay terrain contour maps," Voron said quietly. "Match topographic anomalies with pattern delay variants. Anything that repeats within the 2-second latency window gets flagged." Jek tapped twice. The laser plasma display rippled, and a dozen translucent rings emerged over the digital terrain, some faded, others burning orange. Each ring rotated on a different axis, their movement tracing unseen vectors through mountain ranges, fault zones, dry riverbeds, and buried communication arrays. "Why these angles?" Aaron asked. Jack answered without looking. "Because they're wrong." Wrong mattered. Wrong meant manipulated geometry, cloaked infrastructure. Aaron leaned into his console, adjusted the sound filters, and narrowed the waveform channel to subharmonic drift. The result came in a fractured hiss, then a single flutter, a data gasp that didn't belong. "Got you," he whispered. 17 tones, each with a unique decay slope. Someone stitched a command net under the terrain. "Any overlaps?" Voron asked, already calculating. "None. They're isolated. Deliberately, like seeds spaced just far enough apart not to trigger detection nets." Voron stepped closer to the triangulation map. The nodes flickered, blinking red, blue, green in sequence, before stabilizing in deep amber. He counted them, 17, each one tied to a different Varnock command structure, each masked under noise, terrain, or civilian data lines. He didn't speak for a moment. Jack broke the silence. "It's not a network." Voron turned. "Then what is it?" "A ritual," Jack said. "They didn't just mock Radic, they did it from every one of these sites, shared the stream, distributed the humiliation. They turned it into a campaign." Voron's gaze sharpened, but his voice stayed flat. "Then we erased the campaign." He moved to the relay input terminal, inserted the command wedge carrying the initial null frame authorization. The system pulsed with recognition. "Begin geostatic locking," he ordered. "I want orbital confirmations synced across both hemispheres before we initiate blind fire programming. No emission signatures, no leak paths." Aaron began the sequence, lips tightening as he loaded the software shell into the satellite alignment protocols. 17 targets, he muttered. 14 active, 2 dormant, 1, he hesitated, then tapped again. 1 is mobile. Voron looked up. "Mobile how?" "It's a relay ship," Aaron said. "Mass stabilized and drift anchored over their northern quadrant. They've been rerouting the command flow through it, like a mirror gate." "Tag it," Voron ordered. "We'll bleed it last." The map on the plasma wall sharpened. Each node shimmered, triangulation rings collapsing around them like cold nooses. The lines tightened. The room darkened. The only sound was the soft clicking of keys, like rainfall in a data storm. Jack's eyes flicked over the closing rings. He wasn't smiling. He looked tired, old despite the youth in his skin. War ages the mind faster than the body. "They gave him a stage," he said under his breath. "We're giving them a blackout." Voron glanced at him. For a moment no command structure separated them. Just men, just memories. Then it passed. "Lock status?" Voron asked. 10 confirmed. 5 sinking. 2 require longer orbit sweeps. Aaron replied. Voron turned back to his console and pressed his ID against the surface pad. A new authorization layer peeled open. A line of code scrolled across the inner strip of glass. "New Null frame, stage 2, active lock triad." A timer began. 17 hours 42 minutes and 18 seconds and ticking. He exhaled through his nose and spoke with the weight of doctrine behind each word. "No signals in, no pulses out. When the timer ends, every one of those centers vanishes. Not from records, not from maps, from memory." Jack nodded once and returned to his console, eyes scanning for any residual micropings. SAT-12 just completed rotation sweep. Node 6 is geo-anchored, confirming final signature, and locking. Aaron triggered the silent pingback, the system returning 0 movement variance. Node locked. 4 more. The room quieted again. Each man in the chamber spoke less now. There was a heaviness to accuracy. Every number, every degree of orbital variance, every decimal tick in latency mattered. And beneath it all, like the heartbeat of a predator waiting to strike, the broadcast now archived, remained open in a sealed tab. Voron opened it once more, not to review, not to relive, just to remember. There was no sound. The feed had degraded from exposure and routing compression. Radic's face flickered, then froze. No pain, no pee. The enemy had turned him into a message. Voron would ensure they read the reply in the language they couldn't mock. Silence. Targeted. Cold. 17 signatures, each now surrounded in amber rings, each one marked, each one waiting. Synchronize orbital drift. All vectors locked. Run final silence sweep. Commander Routh Sek stood beneath the dome of the orbital weapons chamber, his breath visible in the cold bled atmosphere. The walls whispered with shifting data, laser plasma maps projected around him, charting arcs, relay velocities, angular timing. No light flickered, no countdown ticked. There was no ceremony here. This wasn't a launch, this was removal. One by one, the orbitals above Narlaxis aligned, not with thrusters or flare, but through incremental gravitational adjustments, small shifts, invisible to radar, microscopic deviations that changed everything. He watched the alignment bands tighten. The display painted them in violet, thin, arcing lines that cut across planetary curvature like brushstrokes laid by an indifferent hand. 17 intersections, 17 origins, each one calculated not for damage, but for silence. Do not engage standard thermal pathways, Sek ordered. Redirect through layered null oscillation. I want ground matter to collapse, not detonate. A technician behind him nodded without speaking. His gloved hands moved across a frozen input plate. There were no loud interfaces here, no screens blinking for attention. The entire room felt as though it had already happened, and they were just watching the echo finish. Field deviance, Sek asked. Nominal came the reply. Surface disruption will be unmeasurable, but once it passes, there will be nothing left to scan. Sek walked to the central projection, an iris of magnetic trails and signal dispersions locked in mid-orbit. The satellites shimmered on the edge of vision, not because they were invisible, but because the system scrubbed them from optical memory by design. Even Earth's own systems couldn't trace them without command-tier access. Timestamp confirmed 3 o'clock Earth Standard, said the operations officer. Auto sequence queued. 10 seconds to ghostfall. Sek didn't blink. We don't need to see it happen, only to know it did. The final marker lit amber. No klaxon sounded, no alert buzzed. There was no recoil, no flare, only the moment. At 3 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds, 17 silent signatures fired from orbit in absolute unison. No heat signatures burst outward, no shock waves punched the atmosphere. What emerged from those satellites wasn't light or energy, it was subtraction. The first command node, buried beneath a fortified outpost on Varnock Ridge, folded inward, not from explosion, but from spatial starvation. Where a facility once stood, command towers, defense rings, subsurface bunkers, there was now only a depression in the earth, shallow and soft, like a place that had never been touched. Miles away, a relay complex wired into a coastal bluff shimmered with flickering light before the cliffside slumped soundlessly into the ocean. The water didn't crash. It filled the absence as if obeying an old promise. Another node, this one underground, beneath an abandoned refinery, simply vanished. Not one alarm, not one fire. The automated lighting grid down the road kept blinking in rhythm, even as the entire communications center it fed no longer existed. In orbit, the satellites dimmed. Their task finished. They severed connection with Earth's mainframe and drifted away, programmed to return only once their memory cores were sterilized. On the planetary surface, command terminals in enemy bunkers flickered, not from overload, but confusion. Heads-up displays stalled mid-scroll. Electrostatic shimmer bled across command charts. Troop alignments desynced. Field officers tapped comm units expecting lag. What they received was absence. In one particularly remote strike, a Varnock war assembly had been in session, 5 leaders discussing Earth's predictable restraint patterns. They didn't scream, they didn't even rise from their seats. The erasure cut through the building like a chasm stitched with air. Walls disappeared. Floors dissolved. Eyes turned to static in less than a blink. Their final moment was spent mid-thought, already losing meaning. Back in the orbital command chamber, Sek's gaze remained fixed on the arc paths. He said nothing. The data would filter in later, if anything remained to report. He walked past the technicians without a word, his boots silent against the pressure-padded floor. The team did not cheer. No backslaps, no affirmations, only quiet gestures as they shut down interfaces and folded back the weapon array casings. Below on Earth, Varin received a status ping. Not a message, not a report, just a dot. He opened it. The interface displayed the triangulation grid he'd assembled, now blank. No nodes, no need for confirmation. In a secure archive node buried under 15 encryption shells, Radek's final image remained in stasis. No label, no flag. In the empty skies above Narlaxis, atmospheric patterns shifted slightly, just a fractional temperature ripple that vanished the moment it was measured. 17 locations across enemy-controlled terrain no longer functioned, not because they'd been destroyed, but because there was nothing left to destroy. "Where's the relay confirmation? I asked for pings 5 seconds ago." Commander Kethran Zul paced the length of his bridge with clipped steps, boots grinding against the rib plating. His command pod floated above a frozen marshland in Sector 3E, encased in reflective shielding that distorted the snowfield horizon into a blur of false serenity. Inside, tension crept like mold between every silence. "Nothing, sir," replied the comms officer. "Channel uplinks are active, but we're receiving void markers. Void markers. Blank response. The system confirms receipt, but sends back no data, no sound, no static, just null." Zul's mandibles twitched. His brow scales pulled tight. That wasn't a malfunction. That was absence. He turned to the primary heads-up display, where the command hierarchy tree once pulsed with green motion indicators. Now it resembled a deforested map, limbs severed, core nodes grayed out. No directives from the central hub. None. Sector 7 is dark. He stared at the list of subordinate clusters blinking red across the field. It wasn't just Sector 7. Every major command relay from the last known Earth-facing deployments had gone cold. Not delayed, not lagged, erased. In a bunker beneath the Varnock Range, Overseer Juldrek Kalv sifted through failure logs, each one time-stamped and marked with an identical trace anomaly. Transmission terminated. No return path. His fingers hovered over the console, unwilling to touch keys that no longer delivered consequence. Signal monitors picked up something strange. His assistant offered. Not interference, just a flat line in the EM band, like the atmosphere skipped a beat. Juldrek didn't answer. His gaze locked on the last working surveillance capture, a still image taken at 2:59. In it, the field station's perimeter lights were mid-cycle. The structures intact. Personnel engaged in routine perimeter sweep. The timestamp rolled forward 1 second. The next image contained nothing. Not wreckage, not debris, just soil smooth and dark pressed flat, as if the base had never been built. "It's not jamming," he muttered. "It's negation." On the fringes of Varnock's diplomatic council, panic took less than an hour to spiral. Chancellor Uldan Revk had received no formal alerts, just a blank screen during his scheduled security review. He'd tried contacting Talvor, repeatedly. No return code, no personal beacon. Even the Council's emergency override, used once during a seismic threat, returned nothing but flickering lines across the laser plasma display. "You will explain this," Revk snarled at his chief protocol engineer. "We're not being attacked, Chancellor," the engineer said cautiously. "Our systems are intact. There's no thermal spike, no explosive trace, but the command paths, they've gone silent all at once." "That's not possible." It wasn't. Until now. Uldan turned, breath catching at a slight static flicker across the central monitor. He watched as the command table refreshed. All 5 military branches blinked offline, the planetary coordination net recompiled, and no leadership tier was left standing. He opened his mouth to speak. Nothing came. In an undisclosed command shelter below the North Plateau, General Rex Talvor sat in front of a console, hands poised over the keys but unmoving. His aides had fled 5 minutes ago, spooked by the terminal's refusal to recognize any override input. Now only the gentle flicker of his personal monitor illuminated the room. The image hadn't changed since the minute Earth's satellite struck. Radek, still bound, still calm, still staring. The feed hadn't been live for nearly a day, yet the display remained locked on that one frozen frame. No matter what Talvor did, command keys wipes, hard resets, the soldier's gaze persisted. "You were nothing," Talvor whispered. "Just noise in the mud. You weren't supposed to matter." The console pulsed softly. A new overlay appeared. Not Earth's, not Varnock's, just text. "Mock a soldier's death, lose your command." Talvor staggered back. His balance faltered as he grabbed for the corner rail. The lights above dimmed, not from power failure, but withdrawal, a kind of retreat in reverse, like the room itself was surrendering from presence. Behind him, static crept into the corners of the walls, screens began to flicker. Reports that hadn't arrived all night suddenly dumped their backlogs, every message a blank slate with timestamps, nothing else. Communications were working, they simply had nothing left to say. Talvor's knees buckled. He collapsed into the command chair, blood thinned across his gums. His eyes widened as the static increased, forming a ring around Radek's image on the screen, not just frozen now, glowing, as if watching back. A final breath dragged through his lungs, then failed to leave. Elsewhere, soldiers stopped mid-patrol to check inactive headsets. Security staff rechecked functional radar systems that displayed perfect skies, too perfect. Engineers tried contacting supply stations, only to be met with non-responses that offered no error codes. Some units began transmitting queries blindly. Others remained still, waiting for orders that would never arrive. Discipline deteriorated not from defeat, but vacuum, not an attack, not a battle. Just the silence of leadership peeled away like skin removed from muscle. In a relay command cruiser drifting above Sector 5B, Officer Varnik Oss reviewed the warfeed archive stored in local memory. His console lagged, the war logs boasting their victorious capture were gone. Every recorded frame, scrubbed, all except one. Radek, unmoving, eyes quiet, and beneath it a whisper of static looped infinitely. Silence listens. He tried to disable the file. He failed. Panic spread faster than fire ever could. It didn't scorch. It unraveled. Pull up his biosync channel. Full transfer. No filters. Viranistov's voice was hushed, but the command cut clean. The operations room remained dim, blue-tinged, the kind of lighting used when a system expected no threats, only aftermaths. He stood beside a terminal linked, not to a comm line or a strike satellite, but to a body, cold, archived. A soldier marked as Key IA protocol lock. The technician beside him hesitated, fingers hovering over the authorization panel. Sir, it's set to autoplay. Upon confirmed termination. No data logs. Just a single file. Open it. Now. A heads-up overlay blinked alive. There was no buffering, no loading. The display offered nothing more than a timestamp, 3 hours 28 minutes and 4 seconds from Radek's death. Then came the voice. No music, no signal flare. Just his breath. Steady, thin, cut by moments of pain that never surfaced as groans. If they find this, and they play it to laugh, let them. Radek's tone was dry, not bitter, just dry, like cracked earth, holding what it could. If they think a uniform stitched to my chest makes me a prop, then maybe that's all I was built for. Maybe my job was to be seen like this, one last time, so someone somewhere feels it. There was a pause. The background sounded like wind through gravel, not real wind, just trench draft, the kind that snakes between armor and bone. I don't care if they edit this, if they loop it, if they stamp my name under it, just make sure anyone is watching, that's all. The room stayed silent. Viren didn't blink. Radek's voice returned, softer now. I always wondered if silence was failure. Growing up, they said silence was the coward's language. But maybe silence listens, maybe it memorizes, and when it finally moves, it doesn't shout, it doesn't warn. Another breath, ragged. One lung had collapsed by then. They knew that from the forensic pull. If I don't come back, I hope someone somewhere doesn't scream about it. I hope they just write it down in a way the enemy will never unwrite. The log ended not with a tone, but with static flicker, a flick, like breath across ash. The file didn't auto-close, it dimmed. Across Earth's secure archives, the voice was played once, only once. No copy authorized, no transcript approved. It was never spoken of in official debriefs, but that single recording, embedded deep within Radek's biosync thread, echoed far beyond his body. In a destroyed field station on the edge of Varnok territory, a shattered comm panel twitched, buried beneath rubble, its core flickered back to life. Not to issue warnings, but to broadcast Radek's voice, transmitted on loop to the empty winds. His face had become legend. Now his words became liturgy. Not vengeance, not fury, just a calm acceptance, recited like prayer. Inside Earth's orbital strategic command, Viren turned from the console. Archive it. Level black. No public access. But sir, no arguments. The world doesn't need another martyr. They need a reason. He exited without waiting for protocol confirmation. Below the Voshan line, the trench where Radek bled now lay undisturbed, not reclaimed, not preserved, just left alone. Snow drifted in, settling into seams between discarded medkits and cracked helmets. Someone had placed a comm beacon upright in the mud. It wasn't broadcasting. It wasn't even charged. It was just there, facing the eastern ridge, as if waiting. In the diplomatic chambers of enemy satellites, fragments of Radek's audio surfaced in static corruption zones. No one traced it. It wasn't Earth's frequency. It had warped, resonance altered through whatever Earth's satellites had done. Now, instead of coordinates, it carried tone, memory in waveform. General Thyron Mox, informed of the log's emergence, offered no reaction. He simply marked the report, observed and sealed the data node. Far from Earth's core systems, a junior technician scanned audio anomalies from field sectors. When he encountered the recording, his screen dimmed. The signal couldn't be deleted. It was embedded, not as a file, but as a rhythm in system pulses. A ghost in the heartbeat of the code. Silence listens. The phrase didn't repeat. It drifted, reached. One officer, unfamiliar with Radek's name, listened to the file and turned off his station for the first time in weeks. Another closed every entertainment channel for the night, staring instead at the stillness outside his viewport. No vengeance. No counterstrike. Just a voice reminding the galaxy of what it had forgotten. Memory isn't loud. It doesn't yell to be heard. It waits, quiet, coiled, unread, until its presence red draws what was once called war into something colder, more final. And somewhere deep in an enemy archive, a technician stared at the face of a soldier he'd mocked on a feed, now unable to erase the message that kept appearing between frames of every system boot. Someone's watching. Lock the archive. Strip the metadata. Erase voiceprint trails down to root. Archivist Velkan Raid's voice cut through the chamber like glass on frost. He stood in the Level 9 data vault, walls alive with heads-up layers of pulsing syntax, entire memory branches folding beneath his commands. Behind him, two junior officers hesitated, not out of incompetence, but because they were watching something they knew wouldn't be acknowledged. The log had already played once. That was enough. Radek's voice now lived in too many untracked places. Requesting deletion protocol for biosync sequence, one officer offered, fingers poised over the command prompt. No deletion, Raid replied flatly. Compression, triple encrypt it and bury it under failed telemetry reports. Let it drown in irrelevance. The heads-up interface glitched briefly, an irregular flicker across the lower left corner. That's how it started, a harmless static line, a micro-echo, nothing unusual, except it repeated again 7 seconds later, then again. Each instance lasted just long enough to leave behind a trace string, 5 characters. MA's did, Raid noticed. He didn't react. Elsewhere in Earth's lower tactical relay branches, places where strategy met systems control, a minor technician flagged a repeating sequence anomaly embedded within a routine packet, meant for satellite firmware calibration. He ran diagnostics, found no error, ran it again. This time the message was longer. Mock a soldier's death. He paused. On the next scan cycle, the message completed itself. Lose your command. He didn't report it. He just stared. Then he copied it to his notes, then deleted the notes. The phrase had no origin point. It didn't route through standard broadcast. It traveled between forgotten layers, obsolete firmware, discarded caches, abandoned comms scripts left running in the corners of forgotten subnets. It didn't shout. It seeped. On Varnock-controlled stations, enemy translators reviewing intercepted Earth code noticed the same sequence, not in official data lines, but in corrupted interface logs, training protocols. In the background layers of non-military environmental sensors, it had no flag, no encryption. It bypassed every known security index. Their first response was to isolate it, their second to panic. Commander Zul's subordinates deleted an entire terminal block after discovering the message embedded beneath their troop roster logs. It would reappear 3 screens later, this time replacing the date stamp on a maintenance report. broadcast control centers received quiet directives to shut down all civilian media for 30 hours. Then the order changed. Permanent suspension. Without explanation, microphones were removed, field recorders dismantled. Even internal voice loggers used by medics and officers were stripped. The Varnak had built their strength on dominance of the narrative. Now they couldn't finish a sentence without fear it might echo somewhere they couldn't predict. Silence wasn't policy anymore. It was survival. In Earth's Black File Division, RAID compiled a final memo for internal audit. Logref #ES147A/null summary. Biosync playback completed. Public release denied. System echo phrase detected. Source undetermined. Spread rate 31% of infrastructure nodes. Recommendation: let the infection run. He closed the file. From that day forward, no one mentioned Sergeant Radek in briefings. His name appeared nowhere in council transcripts. Commanders who requested the incident report were sent generic footnotes. But across Earth's shadow net, coders began etching 3 letters onto hardware cores: MSD. The initials meant different things to different people, but no one asked out loud. Meanwhile, in the Varnak quadrant, officers began hesitating before speaking in closed rooms. They muted recorders. They repeated orders face to face, never over channels. They covered their mouths when issuing directives, as if even breath might carry surveillance. The collapse hadn't ended with satellites or silos. The silence was spreading. In the mining colony of Dravet 9, a child found an abandoned training tablet once used by his older brother. When he powered it on, the screen blinked white for 3 seconds before revealing a single line in Earth Common. They watched. They never forgot. He asked his father what it meant. His father threw the tablet in the waste furnace. On a Varnak war barge preparing for redeployment, the chief comms technician discovered corrupted auditory feedback during a test signal loop. He played the feedback back at half speed. Radek's voice whispered through the noise, "Make sure someone's watching. No timestamp, no sender, just a tone that wasn't meant to be there and couldn't be erased." RAID, reviewing these echoes from Earth's side, understood one thing: vengeance fades. Fear rooted in silence becomes culture. He walked the length of the corridor outside the vault, the doors hissing shut behind him. No alarms sounded, no alerts pinged. The system had already done its work. Cadet Vesh, report status of relay node D4. The voice over his headset crackled, stripped of authority by signal decay. Drake Vesh didn't answer immediately. He stood at the entrance of the outpost's comm chamber, one hand resting against a cracked support column, the other clutching a damp log sheet. He didn't need to check it. He already knew there were no updates, no pings, no orders, no trace of leadership. He stepped into the hollow space, his boots brushing against old ash patterns etched across the concrete floor. The command desks were cold, untouched for weeks. The air was dry enough to flake paint from terminals. The outpost had been evacuated, but he hadn't left. No one had told him to. Above him, the satellite array blinked in erratic rhythm through the skylight glass, a dot pulsing like it forgot how to stop. Every few seconds, it blinked once, then darkness, then again, always the same interval. No signal, just presence. Vesh sat down in the observer's chair and dragged the manual monitor online. The heads-up panel sputtered, then painted the air in front of him with ghost code, half-rendered interface, corrupted overlays, system boot loops stuck at 87%. The feed buzzed. No image, just white flickers across a static field. He adjusted the gain manually. For a moment, there was nothing but white noise. Then a frame held. It lasted a heartbeat. The image wasn't clear, not sharp, but enough. A human, restrained, not in pain, not afraid, just watching. Eyes fixed forward, unmoving. As if the screen had become a mirror, the signal dropped. The overlay collapsed into black. Vesh didn't move. His fingers curled slowly on the console edge, nails digging into soft polymer. That face wasn't a stranger. He'd seen it years ago, half-watched, dismissed as propaganda. A soldier, a recording played by officers to justify their early strikes against Earth. Back then, Vesh hadn't cared. He barely remembered the broadcast, but the image now stared through time, unsmiling. "You're not supposed to be here," he whispered. "You were deleted." The silence that followed felt wrong, not empty, but aware. He rose, paced once around the chair, then returned. Sat down again. The satellite above blinked once more, a rhythmic pause, then again, unchanging. He accessed the internal diagnostics. System logs didn't list any visual memory, no record of a feed, no trace of the image he'd just seen. He checked external links. Everything was blank. He leaned forward. Is this some leftover protocol? His voice cracked as he spoke, unsure who, if anyone, was listening. No answer. No data stream, just the gentle pulse of static humming in the walls, like the station itself was exhaling after holding its breath too long. Vesh pulled the old comm tablet from the drawer beside the console. It still ran manual access ports. He punched in a blind query. Command confirmation required. Deployment orders pending. The reply came within seconds. User not recognized. He swallowed. Tapped again. User not recognized. One more time. User not required. The third message made his stomach drop. He dropped the tablet. It clattered to the floor. Screen flickering. From the periphery of the heads-up display, text began to crawl. Not a feed. Not an alert. Just 5 words. Someone's watching. He recoiled, breath catching in his throat. The letters faded almost immediately, replaced by another system prompt. No input detected. Restarting interface. The display powered down. The lights dimmed. In the comms corridor outside the chamber, he heard something shift, a soft click of movement, like someone adjusting their stance in an empty hallway. He didn't look. Instead, he spoke softly. Is that you? No voice answered. The room stayed silent. No footsteps, no wind, just that presence pressing into the edges of his awareness, like frost creeping under a sealed door. He whispered the only thing that made sense. Someone's watching. Outside, the satellite blinked once more, then ceased. Not a fade, a full stop. No more rhythm, no more light. Vesh stared upward. The void above the glass felt heavier now, as if weightless eyes had closed in satisfaction. He stood, unsure what to do next. No orders, no comrades, no instruction, just that last image, and the quiet. He picked up the fallen tablet, its screen still cracked. The final phrase was burned into the corner, ghost code impossible to scrub, MSD. He didn't know what it stood for. He didn't need to. Whatever had erased the command net, silenced generals, collapsed fleets without a trace, had now left him a message. Not as a threat, not as a curse, but as legacy. Drak Vesh stepped into the corridor, leaving the outpost behind. His eyes didn't look back. They searched the sky. He didn't speak again that day, but the whisper remained. Seal, the final node. Execute full lock. Cadet Final Sarn's voice was steady as he stood before the command interface, his breath shallow inside the airtight chamber. He had never been cleared for Black Tier access before. His badge still bore the silver trim of probationary clearance. Yet here he was, alone, at the final console. Above the controls, the heads-up display rotated slowly, each line of code folding into itself, completing the last phase of null frame. 17 site identifiers dimmed one by one. Their geographic markers dissolved. The logs didn't vanish. They were rewritten to show nothing had ever existed. Confirmation received, the system replied. Finnell removed his glove and pressed his palm against the final biometric seal. A narrow slit opened, revealing a sliver of obsidian black wafer, no larger than a coin. He inserted it into the relay mount. The room darkened. One symbol blinked into view on the far wall. A single eye, closed. Above the planet once known as Verask, where the Varnox Fleet Command once operated, a satellite rotated into a passive drift cycle. It broadcast no signal, emitted no heat, displayed no Earth insignia, but whenever a ship passed beneath it, systems slowed, minor interface bugs emerged. Sensor flickers distorted maps by fractions, always subtle, always fixable, but never traceable. These were the Watchers, non-weapons, non-networked. They didn't defend, they remembered. RAID's final directive had authorized 500 of them. No orbit patterns, no announcements, no threat, just Watchers, scattered quietly across enemy sectors, silent nodes set to observe, to record, to archive, and when required to forget. In Earth's deep archive, a chamber whose name had been redacted even from command charts, General Tharn Mox reviewed a sealed memo prepared for the Doctrine Codex. Response to protocol breach. Voshan Trench violation. Findings. No further action necessary. Psychological saturation complete. Threat response. Not applicable. Enemy activity. Deteriorated. Self-limited. Additional recommendation. Silence is hereby recognized as official doctrine. Mox signed it with his thumbprint. The memo was never sent. It was archived in a vault that required 2 dead commanders' biometric data to access. No one would see it. No one needed to, because by then, the message had already spread. On the Varnock side, officers began destroying their own communications gear, not under orders, but under fear. Councils disbanded without vote. Sub-commanders refused to issue commands aloud. Military academies removed vocal training from protocol drills. Strategic meetings were conducted entirely through coded gestures. Silence was no longer inconvenience. It was shield. Some commanders developed complex rituals, unspoken gestures before speaking, eyes averted from active displays. No one explained why. No one dared say Radek's name. But the phrase lived. Mock a soldier's death, lose your command. It appeared carved into the inside of lockers, etched into command seats with fingertips, whispered once in sleep by a comms officer during sedation. No one taught it. No one traced it. It existed without beginning. Back on Earth, Final Sarn closed the command vault and stepped outside. The hallway stretched in near total darkness, lit only by floor-level guides. He didn't walk quickly. He didn't need to. He passed Voronistave, who waited silently at the observation tier above the vault. "It's done?" Voron asked without turning. "It was already done," Final replied. "I just finished the signature." Voron nodded. "Any signal?" "No, but the satellites adjusted their orientation. They're aligned now." "Good," Voron said, and said nothing else. Neither of them looked up. The ceiling of that level was a dome of scorched black glass. Behind it, Earth's defense net revolved in total stillness. Years later, long after the war became cold data and ash-scribed treaties, the story still lingered. A captured soldier, a broadcast never repeated, a retaliation that didn't speak, and a final frame, a single image of a man bound in silence, not screaming, not begging, just waiting, watching. Across dozens of fractured civilizations, the story morphed. Some called it Earth's Ghost War. Others called it the Doctrine of Absence. To the Varnock, it was never spoken. They didn't give it a name, only a signal, a symbol. One eye, closed. They didn't threaten. They didn't promise. They simply removed you from memory. And from that absence, without a declaration, without a sound, a new law emerged. Not penned by diplomats or enforced by weapons, but written into the behavior of empires who now flinched at their own echoes. Earth never needed to say another word again.